Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503, and this is the summary for the 10th lecture in the Community Media Production lecture series. I've produced the PowerPoint and I've got quite a few clips and video images and diagrams in this. So I won't be sharing the actual PowerPoint, but I will share the notes that I've produced, which are available via the DMU Commons wiki. So if you go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and search for the TECH2503 page and look for the lecture notes section, and they're already linked in the week 10 section. The topic this week is to look at the idea of community media and neighbourhood solidarity. Unfortunately, we've had some interesting news reports this week which relate to the issues that we want to discuss. I'll come to them in a second. If you want to look at the reading for this this lecture, I've used the chapter 6 in the Stuart Isaacs book, the social problems in the UK, and it's about migration. It's Norman Ginsberg, and he's talking about migration and the social construction of migration in UK civil life and politics. I've also used chapter 7 by Simon Guy, Beyond Japonism, I think that's how you pronounce it, in the Stephen Moore book, the Pragmatic Sustainability book. So they're worth reading as kind of background contextual information to the lecture. What was published this week was a report by the government from about migration and integration in British communities, so British social life. So there's a report that's come out about, they call the Casey Review, which is about the way that British communities are increasingly or perhaps are being seen as increasingly segregated. So there's less opportunity for people to integrate into a broad sense of British life, and instead people are being characterised in the newspapers, at least, as living, if you like, in ghettos. So we're going to look at this as an issue in terms of the way that the idea of migration and how it relates to communities and the development and sustainability of communities is constructed. So the idea is to look at the broad argument, if you like, of migration as an issue which is either seen as a social problem, in terms of either the use and access to resources and housing and jobs, those kind of things, or on the other hand, it's seen as a benefit for employers in terms of flexibility for being able to kind of employ people for specific either high-skilled or even low-skilled jobs. And then we'll look at the idea that there's a kind of often a moral panic has been fed by some of the more vociferous elements of popular journalism, if you like, which argue that immigration and large-scale immigration is a threat to the British way of life, to our cultural identity and our cultural cohesiveness. So we'll look at the way that some of the politicians have managed or attempted to manage the process of migration and immigration, and we'll also look at the way that, kind of the fears that are often reported in some of the newspapers kind of overplay and overcharacterize the debate and discussion, which isn't based on empirical evidence. It's often based on perceptions of immigration. So we'll look at the Casey Review in some detail and the way that it's been reported. We'll think about some of the issues that are involved in terms of the fears of cultural difference or the role that immigration plays in the formation of a contemporary, modern, globalised British society. And the sense that, kind of there's often reported in some of the more emotive reports from some newspapers and media outlets that there's a kind of backlash against this, which isn't borne out in some of the evidence, which suggests that actually kind of secularisation is still quite an important force that drives people along to have a kind of shared social engagement, civic engagement. So the question is, I suppose, through this is, one, what motivates people in terms of their need to migrate. So we look at different forms of migration, which are often lumped together. So there's economic displacement, there's political displacement in terms of conflict and in terms of oppression. There's also family displacement or family migration, which is based on the need to join and have a family life. And we'll look at Leicester as an example of a city with a large Somali community and how that's represented through community media and community radio stations like Eva FM. And then we'll look at the kind of way that asylum seeking is kind of dealt with. These are kind of pretty headline views at this point. But there's a kind of a long history to the way that waves of immigration, and even that phrase is an emotive phrase, have been dealt with and managed and described in different decades. So we'll look a little bit at the kind of the Windrush generation in the 1950s and the kind of racism that people met when they arrived in the UK from the Caribbean. So this is a very charged political set of issues, but there are local things that we can learn about immigration and multiculturalism. And the question is, I suppose, can we learn from examples of integration from Leicester's experience, and can we learn from the use and the development of community media as a facilitator for these issues and these changes in society? I have my doubts that community media is being funded properly and being managed properly and supported by government properly as a tool in as one way of helping to support and develop people in terms of their understanding about migration, but that's an issue that we can discuss and debate quite appropriately. So as I say, the notes are up online. There's some reading which you might do, which is I'll get this right in a second. There's some viewing that you might want to look at. There's a short film which was shot around Braunston from a couple of years ago, from 2013, called This is Braunston. It's well worth watching, about the kind of community identity and cohesiveness in one of Leicester's most deprived wards in Braunston. I've also posted a link to a programme via the Box of Broadcasts, which is about, it's a Radio 4 programme, and it's about it's Eastern Europeans in Brexit land and kind of the response that people from Eastern Europe have had since the Brexit vote. And then there's a programme which is part of a regular series called Thinking Aloud on Radio 4, which looks at the English Defence League and the way that the English Defence League contextualises itself or frames itself as the real immigrants to the UK. So it's kind of two sides of the debate, if you like, that are represented in these programmes. So I'll post the notes up, and I'll see you at the lecture.